Next, we are going to cover the tact. According to the Cooper book, a tact is a verbal operant under the functional control of nonverbal discriminative stimulus, and it produces generalized condition reinforcement. So when we think of a tact in common language, we can think of it as a verbal operant in which we label things. Before we can truly understand what a tact is, it may be helpful to look at some examples of what a tact is and what it is not. We are going to provide some examples. You have to then identify if it is a tact or if it is not a tact. If you have any questions during this or the examples do not make sense, please come find your supervisor and ask for help. Example number 1. You are walking on the street with a client, and the client sees a bird and then says, "Bird." You praise him for what he says. Is this an example of a tact, or is this a non-example of a tact? This is an example of a tact. We know this because if we're walking on the street and you see a bird flying and say bird, you're tacting what the object is. However, if you said bird while wanting the bird and were reinforced by being given the bird, that would be considered a mand. So remember to look at the whole contingency so we accurately define and identify verbal operants. Great job. Let's keep going. Let's look at another example or non-example, and you again will tell us what it is. If you're walking in the clinic with a client and the client sees a toy bird and then says bird, you praise him for what he says, and then you give him the bird and he has a big smile on his face while he plays with it. Is this an example of a tact, or is this a non-example of a tact? This is a non-example. This would actually be considered a mand, so it is not a tact. Remember, we have to look at the whole contingency before deciding if something is a tact or a mand. There is a lot of different ways that we can take data on a tact. Sometimes for some clients, we may be looking at the frequency, so the number of tacts a client emits. Other times, we might be looking at the variety of tacts. So we want to see, are they just saying one tact over and over again, or do they have a variety of tacts in their repertoire? At the ABC clinic, there are a couple different ways that we do data collection. You might use a clicker to count the frequency. You might write things down on a data sheet. For example, with text, you might be tracking if the client is having independent responses, if there's error in responding, if they're not responding at all, and then the type of prompts you have to use. We will go into prompting and the different types of prompts in Module 2. But for now, remember that you always need to read the client protocol and program because there's so many different ways we can take data on tax. Right now, you might be feeling really confused or frustrated because a mand and a tact are two words you've never heard before. Don't worry, take a deep breath, and we're going to be doing a lot more to make sure we all understand these concepts. Throughout the rest of this module, we're going to do some role plays. You're going to stop and role play with your supervisor, and we're also going to discriminate between a mand and a tact. So if you're thinking, why can't we just use the word label? Or what in the world is the point of a tact? Or how is a tact different than a mand? Don't worry, your questions will be answered. Next, we are going to look at some role plays and some videos, which will give us some more opportunities to truly learn what a tact is.
At the Verbal Behavior Center for Autism, we teach our children to communicate by teaching them a tacting repertoire. Tacting is labeling. So our children then learn to label things in their environment, and that is oftentimes the first step in establishing conversational skills which help children to communicate with people in their environment. Good.
Want to be my TV.
There you go. Good. Perfect. Very nice.
And a cat.
Nice job, bud. Here, Ben is being shown several pictures of things he will see in his everyday life. He has learned how to tact or label each of these pictures. The ultimate goal is for Ben to label what he sees when he sees it. Labeling items is one of the first steps in conversation building.
All right, I want you to look up here. What letter is it?
A.
How about this one?
T.
What about this one?
O.
And what number is this?
721.
What is it?
Here, Sam is learning to tact or label letters and numbers. The acquisition of letter and number identification helps to establish pre-academic skills, which will be beneficial for him in future school settings. As you saw at the Verbal Behavior Center for Autism, we teach our children to tact. Tacting can be extremely effective in teaching children how to communicate with others in their environment regarding things that they see.
Here is an example of some things that you might do with your client. When working on tacts, remember, we want the client to be able to label whatever the object is and eventually to be able to do that by themselves. So here's an example of what you might do. You might hold up a cup and say, "What is it?" And the client should then say, "Cup," and then you would provide reinforcement. Say if you hold up a cup and you say, "What is it?" and your client says, "Bowl," you would repeat the SD and say, "What is it?" "A cup," and you would vocally prompt the right answer. Another example of a tact is something that might occur just in the natural environment. So say you and your client are at the park or maybe at their home, and your client goes, "Look, a dog!" Now, before you can count this as a tact, we have to look at the whole contingency. Remember, especially during data collection, just because they label something, you have to look at the consequence to see, should I consider this a mand or a tact? Now that we've gone into detail about what a mand is and what a tact is, we now need to look at some examples, and you will get to practice saying, is the example an example of a mand or a tact? Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Here is the example. Remember, you're going to be saying if this is an example of a mand or a tact. You are working with a client and they say, "Want cookie." You praise him for what he says and deliver a cookie to him. What do you think this is an example of? Is this a mand or a tact? This is an example of a mand. Let's look at another example. Remember, you're going to say if it is a mand or a tact. You are working with a client and hold up a picture of a cookie. You ask them what it is. They say, "A cookie." Is this a mand or a tact? This is an example of a tact. You finished! Great job finishing Module 1. We learned so much about mands and tacting, and also having to discriminate between them. If you have any questions about a mand or a tact or got any examples wrong and do not understand why, please do not hesitate to go talk to your supervisor. Remember, it's really important that we know the difference between both of these concepts. We have to know what a mand is and what a tact is for when we work with our clients and just for the field of behavior analysis in general. We're so glad that you're here, and we hope you enjoy learning about mands and tacts. See you soon.